Welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined from the broadcast booths here at Progressive Field by Paul Hoynes. We're both at the game here Monday as the Guardians fall to the Colorado Rockies 8-6 in a game where they had a late lead but let things slip away. But the game sort of secondary. It's not the main story of the day, Hoynesy. The big news of the day is Emmanuel Clase joining Luis Ortiz as Guardians pitchers who have been placed on paid non-punishment administrative leave while Major League Baseball investigates allegations connected to sports gambling. When you and I finished recording our first podcast of the day this morning, it was only a few minutes later that the news broke and we got word that Major League Baseball was investigating Clase. What was your immediate gut reaction when you found out that Clase faces what could be ultimately a lifetime ban in the sport?
I was shocked, Joe. The people I've been talking to while working on this story had told me that Ortiz was the only Guardians player or staff member involved. But I've since learned that, in investigating Ortiz, that investigation led them to Clase. And Joe, this organization has had bad days before, lots of them. But this ranks right up there. You're talking about two prominent pitchers, one a starter, one the best closer in franchise history, at least the top saver in franchise history, and they both could be looking at lifetime bans. The investigation goes through August 31st. We've already seen it extended once on Ortiz. It would not surprise me if it gets extended again, Joe, because these guys are in trouble. This is not screwing around anymore. And we saw the end result of it's not only hurting the team's reputation. It's not only, drawing fans to question, the great game of baseball, the integrity of it, and what's going on the field, but it's affecting the ball club. And, they've had to make major changes on this team, and we saw the result of it tonight.
Yeah, if I took you back to July 1st, before we got word of Luis Ortiz's suspension and before all of this started, and you looked at what the Guardians had in terms of their starting rotation starting to come around and really sort of blossom and the youth that's behind it, and Emmanuel Clase, under team control for 3 more years after this, you would probably tell me that this team was in good shape. Now you take away a guy who looked like he could have been a foundational piece in that rotation for years to come, and you take away like you said, the greatest closer this organization has known, at least in the last 15 to 20 years. You're talking about just two devastating blows. Are the Guardians able to recover this year and make a push for the playoffs? Are the Guardians able to recover beyond this, just based on what they thought they had and what they thought they were going to be able to do?
Yeah, I do not think they recover from this, Joe. I think this is like a body blow right before the trading deadline. If you were going to trade Clase, which there was a lot of rumors that they were going to trade him, you can't trade him now. You can't trade Ortiz, obviously. Who's going to take him? And Chris Antonetti said, I guess inferred that today when we talked to him that you can't. There's rules that you can't trade him when a player is on leave. So it's just just really a mess. And with Ortiz, you had a guy, like you were saying, Joe, a guy that could be a 200-inning pitcher, a 30-start pitcher. He's young. He's got, 4 or 5 years of control left, and he may just thrown his whole career away. It's mind-boggling. And, this is, I think we've undersold this story for a while now with Clase in there. And, fortunately, I guess MLB has told Cleveland, the organization, that they're not looking at anybody else in the organization. No other players, no other staff members, no other employees. But, I heard the same thing before that.
Right.
So who knows where this investigation leads, but it's not going to be good news for Clase or Ortiz.
Right. And we had heard that line about nobody else was being looked at until we learned about the Clase investigation. So the investigation is going to take and run its course. It's going to go in whatever direction it goes. But, my question is, and a question that we posed to Chris Antonetti this afternoon: what has the organization done since the Luis Ortiz investigation was announced to sort of address this issue, or have they done anything? And what Antonetti fell back on was, hey, in spring training, we put these guys through the paces. We tell everybody in spring training what the rules are. We explain it in English. We explain it in Spanish. We make sure that they know what the rules are. So ostensibly, Antonetti put this on the two individuals, Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase. As you know, this in Antonetti's mind, it's not an organizational failing; it's an individual one.
Well, I think MLB, the investigative office, meets with every team in spring training and goes through just what you were talking about, Joe. They put on skits. They tell you what places to avoid in your different cities. They they introduce to the players how they can get scammed, and they talk gambling. And but I was talking to Antonetti later today or after the press conference, and I asked him, is there another layer that you can put in, another layer of protection? He was he said it's something we might have to look into, but how do you do that, Joe? Do you hire former FBI agent, and he follows your players around every day? I don't know how you do that. Sooner or later, these guys are all 23, 24, 25. They've got to take responsibility for it. They know the rules. They know you can't gamble. They're not stupid. This is plain. It's posted in every clubhouse in the big leagues and in the minor leagues too.
And I go back to last season when a former Guardians pitcher, Kelly, was suspended for something similar, and the utility guy for San Diego, Marcan, he was suspended. He was given a lifetime ban for gambling, and then I look at Marcan, Ortiz, and Clase, and I wonder, is there anything in common there? Being Latin players, being from a foreign country, and having language barriers and those sort of things. Is that something that makes certain groups of players more susceptible to being taken advantage of in this way? And I'm not trying to make this any sort of issue of anything beyond a player being taken advantage of, but do they need to put extra protections in place for players who have language barriers or any sort of difficulty understanding things? And again, I go back to Antonetti saying that this is they've done their due diligence in terms of making sure that everybody understood what the rules were with gambling.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Joe. I mean, every team has an academy in the Dominican Republic or in Venezuela where these players go through. They go through. Go to school. They go to base. Obviously they're in there to play baseball, but they learn the English language. They learn rudimentary skills, and gambling is part of that. And I remember Alex Cora when he played here. There's now the Boston's manager. I asked him, there was some incident like this that came up, and he said, hey, those rules are written in Spanish as well as English. These guys know that. All they have to do is read it or ask somebody else. They know the rules. So, it's, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that's a legitimate excuse. You come to the big leagues, you better act like a big leaguer, or you're going to get tossed out on your ear.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, whether you believe it or not, or whether you buy it, does Major League Baseball buy it, and what could be the penalties? We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We heard Chris Antonetti reiterate that multiple times in his press conference today. Don't get too far ahead and prejudge before the investigation runs its course. But ultimately, these guys are facing lifetime bans from the sport. Should Guardians fans, start thinking and start operating from the perspective of, these guys aren't going to be part of this organization moving forward?
Yeah, I would think, they better start separating themselves from this. Hopefully, this all works out. Hopefully, the charges, whatever the investigation turns up nothing, or they are, cleared of any allegations, Ortiz and Clase. That would be the best outcome. But Joe, this thing is running through August 1st. Obviously something happened here. There's a spark, there's some smoke, a lot of smoke, and there's a fire, and we'll have to see how this goes. My question is, Joe, okay, let's say they get banned for a year and then they come back, or they're cleared, of their investigation. How are they accepted back in that clubhouse? Who is do they get the full support of their teammates, or are their teammates going to be every time they make a bad play or throw a wild pitch or give up a home run? Are they going to be questioning that? I mean, that's human nature, I think.
Yeah, I think trust is the biggest thing that you can have in that clubhouse in that situation, and these guys absolutely broke their teammates' trust. It would be interesting to me to hear what Jose Ramirez would say off the record, candidly, about his countrymen, his guys who he knows, and I've seen him interacting with Luis Ortiz and with Emmanuel Clase in the clubhouse when sort of their guard is down. Obviously, it's in Spanish, so I don't know what they're saying, but in those situations, these guys are close. And this is just could be a devastating blow for these guys. Now, how that translates to performance out on the field in terms of can this team, pick itself up off the mat once again, again and again. This team has been dealt so many different sort of gut punches over the last several years, whether it's injuries or health or, just facing insurmountable odds against, teams with 300, $700 million payrolls in the postseason. I look at this and I wonder, we talked to Slade Ciccone after tonight's game, and he said this team, that's what they do. They bounce back. But I kind of tend to agree with you in terms of playoff chances this year. I don't know if there's any recovering from this.
Yeah, and if you're the front office, how apt are you to buy in, Joe? How apt are you to help this team to go out and get a hitter, to go out and get a right fielder, to go out and add to this offense or add to this pitching staff or add to the bullpen? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we saw a little bit of a run before the break. Then they carried it out through coming out of the break against Oakland and Baltimore. Played very well. They go to Kansas City and lose 2 out of 3. And tonight they lose to a 27-win team in the Rockies. It was a good game. Obviously, they came back. They took the lead, but they didn't have Emmanuel Clase to close the door. They had to turn to Cade Smith. And, Cade, I think was, obviously the game sped up on him. He's closed before, but he's not the closer.
Yeah, it was, let's get into breaking down a little bit of the game and we can talk about, when they arrived at the point where you would naturally have seen Emmanuel Clase come into the game and you would think at that point things would be all over. But it was Cade Smith, and I think everybody's sort of eyes were on him. And it's not that Cade Smith can't handle the pressure. We've seen it before. We've seen him rise to the occasion before. Early in the season, he saved 3 games in a 4-day stretch against the Yankees and the Red Sox when Emmanuel Clase was sort of unavailable in that role or not being used in the closer's role for whatever reason. And so we know that he can do that and get those outs in the 9th inning. But this was the case. Bo Naylor's 3-run home run ties the game in the 7th inning, and the Guardians take the lead after that with a bases loaded walk by Carlos Santana, a line drive RBI single by Daniel Schneemann with the bases loaded. And you're thinking they're in good shape to turn the game over to Cade Smith. But Hunter Gaddis gives up a long home run in the 8th inning, and the deficit's 1 as they go to the 9th, and Smith gives up the leadoff double, and Stephen Vogt talked about that being a mistake pitch to Warming Bernabel, a rookie who is having a pretty hot start to his major league career.
I see what you did there, Joe.
Yeah, you see what I did there. I'm sorry about that. Warming Bernabel 2 for 5 with a double and a home run, an RBI. This guy, I think, when he stepped to the plate in the 9th inning, his career OPS was 1,400. Basically, all of his hits had been extra base hits, including the 2 home runs. But he hits a ball that gets lodged in the left field wall for a ground rule double, and then the bunt attempt, the sacrifice bunt attempt, I believe Brenton Doyle, and Cade Smith throws wide of first base. It's the circus sort of showed up, and you could tell that Cade Smith was sort of feeling the pressure there.
Yeah, and I think those 3 saves early in the season, he looked great, but he also was pitching with the knowledge that Class A is going to come back. This is going to be his job. I'm going to, I'll pretty soon I'll be back in the eighth or seventh or eighth inning where I'm used to pitching. And tonight he was the guy. He was the man. And it takes a while to do this, Joe. This is a tough. Everyone thinks you can have anybody can pitch the ninth inning. That's a fallacy. Baseball people will tell you that anybody can. There's some baseball people that will swear to God that anyone can pitch the ninth inning. It's all about analytics, but it isn't. We've seen great pitchers with great arms that can't go near the ninth inning. And so this is the good thing is Smith has done it before. I think he'll adapt to it, and I think he'll have success there. But when Vogt said he's going to go closer by committee, I cringed, Joe. That never works.
Yeah, if you're telling me that you have a closer by committee, you're telling me you don't have anybody who can that you really trust to give that ball to at the moment. And I think Cade Smith is obviously the guy that they want to be in that role. But like you said, I think every closer, coming up has to go through something like this to get to the good stuff, to get to the point where he settles in and he knows what he's capable of. And I think the ceiling is very high for Cade Smith. We know what he's capable of. We've seen it at the highest levels. It's just a matter of now making that adjustment and moving forward. I have no doubt in talking to him pregame, he said, my job's to go out there and get 3 outs. My job's to put up a 0 in whatever inning they tell me to pitch in. And it's almost like I get a little sense of Corey Kluber out of him, just a little too stiff and robotic. I think if he sort of loosens things up and lets himself sort of feel the feelings, I don't know if that's the part of his mechanism there. I was there. I saw the guy take 106-mile-an-hour line drive off the 1/8 of an inch plastic bill of his cap. His life could have ended at that point, and he gets up and strikes out the next guy he faces. No doubt in my mind that he has the ability to go out there in any ninth inning and shut things down. He just didn't get it done tonight.
Yeah, and that's a good way of putting it. You have to be convinced you are the guy, and then you have to prove to yourself you are the guy. And Cade Smith has the stuff. He's got the arm. He's got the body. I think he'll be fine, Joe. But he's going to have to. There's going to be some growing pains. The thing I like about him, I don't think he worries about yesterday. I think he turns the page pretty quickly. At least he seems that kind of guy, and you've got to be able to do that as a closer.
Yeah, well, Cade Smith looks a lot like Clark Kent. I'm sure it was the scene where Superman gets angry and burns down the Fortress of Solitude when he got back to the clubhouse because he was not happy. I have it on pretty good information that Smith was not a happy camper when he got back to the clubhouse following the game. What's this mean going forward now for this club? Beyond the Class A news, beyond losing the first of a 3-game series against the worst team in baseball, this is still a team that by the end of the week could, claw its way back into shouting distance of the third wild card spot. But does this mean that we could be having a whole nother conversation about a Stephen Kwan trade at this point? Does losing your trade chip in Emmanuel Clase make you turn your attention to Stephen Kwan, Shane Bieber? Does Thursday's trade deadline change now because you don't have maybe all the bullets in your gun?
Yeah, that's a great question. Bieber is scheduled to throw a 4-inning rehab game for Akron tomorrow. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would make a big move like that, like a Quan trade. I don't see that happening, but who knows right now? I think, the way that the way this week has started, I think they're going to take a conservative approach, kind of pull in their horns a little bit and maybe, kind of like they usually do, play defense, play offense, and try to, kind of thread the needle on this thing.
So Hoynes is predicting a quiet trade deadline on Thursday.
Yeah,
Is that
I
what
feel
this is?
strongly both ways, Joe.
Oh my goodness. I would be in favor of a quiet trade deadline. I think, it being an off day for the Guardians on Thursday too might ease things a little. Again, you're looking at potentially this team feeling a whole lot different by the start of Friday morning. Carlos Santana, 2 hits today, gets on base 3 times, drives in a run. Had a little bit of a scare with a play near home plate where it looked like he might have tweaked an ankle at some point. And we all sort of turned to each other in the press box thinking, well, if they were thinking about trading Carlos Santana, that might have been a very untimely injury as well. But he came through. But we all know that Carlos Santana doesn't want to go anywhere come Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, I think Carlos would like to stay here if at all possible. He's been through this before. 3 different times he's been traded at the deadline. In fact, he came here, and I believe he came here from the Dodgers in a deadline deal for Casey Blake about
Right.
1,000 years ago. So, that's something to watch. I wonder what other teams think of Carlos. He hasn't had the best start in the second half. Maybe he's starting to come around a little bit. Still playing really good defense. So that's what's one thing. But what are you going to get for Carlos, Joe? What? How's that going to make you better?
At this point, it might be addition by subtraction, just allowing a guy like CJ Kifus to come up if that's the play they make. Hey, before we get going, you got to mention former Guardians second-round draft pick and former top prospect Tyler Freeman coming through with 3 big RBIs against his former team, his first game back here at Progressive Field. Got to feel good for Tyler Freeman, who was traded away at the end of spring training for Nolan Jones. Freeman comes in hitting about 312, while Nolan Jones about 100 batting average points south of that. That looks like another tough trade for the Guardians in that regard.
Yeah, I talked to Tyler after the game, Joe. He was loving life, man. He says he still loves the Guardians, everything about the organization. He said he's still trying to get over the trade, but he goes, this was a revenge game for me. And, I'm happy with the way it worked out. And, but, he spent a lot of time talking to David Fry and Quan and a bunch of the other players and coaches before the game. I think his heart is still in Cleveland, Joe.
Yeah, well, he left it all out there today, and it was not the result that the Guardians had hoped for in the opening game, the beginning opportunity for the Cade Smith closer era here in Cleveland. We will be back to talk more on Wednesday's podcast after game 2 of this series. Hoinsey, we'll check in with you then.
Okay, Joe.